"Excuse me, sir. Can $3 buy a dad here?" The little black girl's voice floated through the bright corridor of the shopping mall like a soft bell, small but piercing enough to stop a grown man mid-step. He turned, phone still in his hand, the world around him suddenly blurring into background noise. She stood beneath the glow of the holiday lights, her shoes scuffed, her jacket too thin for the December chill. In her small hand, she held 3 wrinkled $1 bills, their corners bent and damp as if they had traveled far in her pocket. Her eyes, wide and serious, met his without flinching. For a moment, the man could not find his breath. The hum of the escalator, the music from the coffee shop, even the chatter of people passing by all faded into silence. He crouched slightly, lowering himself to her level. "What did you say, sweetheart?" His voice was careful, uncertain, like he was afraid the question might break if he spoke too loudly. She lifted her hand higher. "I have $3. My brother said that maybe it is enough to buy a dad. Maybe not a big one, just a kind one." Gasps rippled through the people nearby. A security guard paused. A woman covered her mouth. But the girl did not waver. Her chin trembled, yet her gaze stayed steady. As if this was not a plea, but a deal she believed the world should honor. The man's heart squeezed. He noticed how her knuckles whitened from holding the money too tight. Those 3 bills were not charity. They were her hope measured in paper and ink. He knelt completely now, the marble floor cold under his knee. "Why do you need to buy a dad, sweetheart?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then whispered, "Because my mom says dads are too expensive. But I have been saving since summer. I thought maybe here, everything is on sale." Her voice cracked on the last word, and one of the bills slipped from her fingers, landing near his shoe. He picked it up slowly and placed it back into her hand. "You keep that," he said softly. "It is worth more than you think." The lights above flickered, reflecting off the tears she tried to hide. Around them, people moved again, but the man stayed still, watching her, realizing he was no longer looking at a stranger. Something deep inside him, something long buried beneath deadlines and numbers, stirred awake. The mall noise swelled again, music and laughter returning, but for him, everything had changed. The question hung in the air between them, as fragile and real as the $3 she carried. Could kindness ever be bought, or was it something waiting to be found? The moment lingered longer than anyone expected. The man stayed kneeling on the cold marble floor, the little black girl standing before him like a question he could not yet answer. Around them, the hum of the shopping mall returned: music, footsteps, chatter, but it all felt distant, as though they were trapped inside a bubble of quiet truth. A woman pushing a stroller slowed as she passed. Her curious eyes flicked from the man in his tailored suit to the small child clutching the $3. "Someone should call security," she whispered to her friend. The words reached the man's ears, thin and sharp. Before he could speak, the uniformed security guard who had noticed them earlier began walking over. His steps were brisk, his expression cautious but polite. "Sir, is everything all right here?" he asked. His hand hovered near the radio on his belt. The girl looked up quickly, startled. "I did not steal," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I just wanted to ask." She lifted her small palm, showing the bills as proof. The man rose slowly to his feet. His height seemed to draw the attention of everyone within 20 feet. "It is all right," he said firmly, turning toward the guard. "She is not causing trouble." The guard hesitated. "You sure, sir? We have had a few kids trying to—" "I am sure," the man interrupted gently. His tone left no room for argument. The guard gave a polite nod and stepped back. The little girl's shoulders dropped with relief. She looked down at her shoes, whispering softly, "I did not want to get in trouble." "Oh, you are not in trouble," the man said. "You were very brave to ask." She looked up again, uncertain whether to believe him. Her eyes reflected the lights above, gold and silver blending into a soft shimmer. "People do not like when I talk to strangers," she said quietly. "But you looked like you listen." The man almost smiled, a faint curve that surprised even him. "Then I am glad you found me," he said. A murmur spread around them. Some people stopped pretending not to watch. A young mother pulled her child closer. 2 teenagers recorded on their phones until an older man told them to put it away. The little girl did not seem to notice any of it. She was staring at the $3 again, smoothing them against her palm. I wanted to buy something that lasts, she said, mostly to herself. Candy disappears. Toys break. But a dad stays. The words landed like stones dropped into a still pond. The man's jaw tightened. He was not sure what hurt more, the innocence of her logic or the truth inside it. He took a quiet breath. "Where's your mother?" he asked softly. "She is at home," the girl said. "She gets tired a lot. I told her I was going to look for a gift. She thinks I am at the thrift store." The man nodded slowly. The mall air felt heavier now, the scent of roasted nuts and perfume suddenly clashing with something raw and real. "Would you like something warm to drink?" he asked after a pause. "Hot chocolate, maybe?" Her eyes widened. "I cannot," she said quickly. "I do not have enough money for that." "And a dad." He crouched again, eye level once more. "It is on me," he said gently. "You keep your $3. You might need them later." She hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Okay," she said softly, "but only if it does not make you poor." The man laughed, a quiet, disbelieving laugh that shook the dust off something in his chest. "I think I will be fine." They walked together toward the nearby cafe. The warm air inside carried the smell of cocoa and baked bread. The barista blinked as they entered, the contrast between the suited man and the little girl with the patched jacket drawing a few curious glances. He ordered 2 hot chocolates and paid before she could protest. When they sat down, she carefully placed the 3 bills on the table, flattening them as if they deserved a seat of their own. The man stirred his drink slowly. "What is your name?" he asked. "Lila," she said. "What is yours?" "Michael," he replied after a brief pause. It had been a long time since he introduced himself to anyone outside a boardroom. Lila studied him. "You look like you have a family," she said simply. "A warm one." Michael's fingers tightened around his cup. "Not really," he said. "I used to." They drank in silence for a while. The window beside them glowed with the reflection of Christmas decorations, tiny golden lights in long spirals. Outside, shoppers hurried past with bags full of gifts. Inside, a child and a billionaire shared a table that suddenly felt like the only quiet place in the world. Lila looked at him again. "Do dads come back sometimes?" she asked. Michael swallowed hard. "Sometimes they do," he said carefully. "If they remember what matters." She nodded slowly, seeming to weigh his answer as if it were part of a transaction. "Then maybe I will wait a little longer before I buy one," she said. He smiled, but his eyes glistened. "That sounds like a good plan." As they sat there, steam rising between them, Michael realized something that unsettled him deeply. He could not stop thinking about the question she had asked in the beginning. He had spent years buying companies, estates, and art, yet this child, with 3 fragile dollars, had just bought his silence, his attention, and something he had forgotten he still possessed: compassion. Outside, snow began to fall, catching in the glow of the streetlights. Inside the cafe, a man who thought he owned everything, and a little girl who thought she owned nothing, shared a moment that would change them both. Neither of them knew it yet, but the world had already shifted. The cafe had begun to empty as evening approached. The sound of cups clinking softened, replaced by the quiet rhythm of rain tapping against the glass. Michael sat across from Lila, his untouched hot chocolate cooling in front of him. The little girl had both hands wrapped around her cup, drinking slowly, her eyes fixed on the steam rising from it like a dream she was afraid to lose. For the first time in a long while, Michael did not check his phone. His assistant had called 3 times, and his calendar was still flashing with reminders about meetings and calls, but he ignored them all. Something about the child's calm focus silenced the usual noise in his head. After a few minutes, Lila looked up. "Thank you for the drink," she said softly. "It tastes like home smells." Michael tilted his head. "How does home smell?" She smiled faintly. "Like soap and rain and sometimes burnt toast when Mama forgets." He smiled too, a small, unguarded expression that softened the lines around his mouth. "That sounds like a good kind of home." Lila nodded, but her gaze wandered toward the window. The sky had darkened, and she pressed her small hand against the glass, tracing the path of raindrops with her finger. "It is getting late," she murmured. "Mama does not like it when I am out after dark." Michael hesitated. "Would you like me to walk you home?" She turned toward him, cautious but not afraid. "You do not have to," she said. "I can walk. It is not far." He reached into his coat pocket for a business card, then stopped himself. Handing a company card to a child felt wrong. "Instead," he said, "I would feel better if I made sure you got home safely." Lila studied his face for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "Okay, but only if you promise not to tell Mama that I was looking for a dad. She would be mad." "I promise," he said. They stepped out into the evening air together. The rain had slowed to a fine mist, blurring the neon lights and the reflections on the pavement. Michael held his umbrella over her, though it barely covered both of them. Lila stayed close, her small footsteps matching his longer ones. As they walked, she pointed to the stores they passed. "That one has pretty dresses," she said. "Mama says I will wear one like that when she gets her strength back." Michael listened quietly. "Is she sick?" "She gets tired a lot," Lila said. "She used to work at an office, but she stopped when her chest started hurting. The doctor said she needs rest, but resting costs money." The man's chest tightened. "Do you have anyone else who helps you?" Lila shook her head. "No, we have neighbors who let me use their microwave. I help them carry boxes sometimes." Michael wanted to say something, anything that could sound helpful, but the words would not come. He had built skyscrapers, launched companies, and spoken to heads of state, yet standing next to a 7-year-old who spoke about survival with such calm made him feel completely unprepared. They turned a corner, and the streets grew narrower. The lights of the mall faded behind them, replaced by flickering signs and cracked sidewalks. "Almost there," Lila said. "We live by the bridge. It is dry under there mostly." He stopped walking. "By the bridge?" She nodded, pointing ahead. "It is not scary. There are blankets. And Mama says, as long as we stay quiet, no one bothers us." The weight of her words hit him harder than any corporate loss he had ever faced. "Lila," he said gently, "how long have you been staying there?" "Since the landlord changed the locks," she said simply. "Mama said we will move again soon when her check comes, but it did not come yet." They reached the bridge, its concrete belly humming with the sound of passing cars overhead. She slipped under the guardrail and motioned for him to follow. He hesitated, then ducked down carefully. Underneath, there was a small space hidden from view. A few blankets, a shopping cart, and a single lantern flickering weakly beside an old plastic bin. A woman lay curled under the blankets, her face pale and her breathing shallow. "Mama," Lila whispered. "It is me." The woman stirred, opening her eyes. When she saw the man, she tensed, trying to sit up. "Who is this?" she asked weakly. "He helped me," Lila said quickly. "He bought me hot chocolate. I told him I cannot pay him back yet, but I will." Michael knelt near the edge of the blankets. "You do not owe me anything," he said softly. "I just wanted to make sure you both were safe." The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, suspicious but too tired to protest. "We are fine," she said. "You should go before someone sees you here." Michael nodded, understanding the fear behind her tone. He placed his coat over the corner of their bedding. "It will keep you warmer tonight," he said. Lila looked up at him. "But you will be cold." "I have another one," he lied. "You keep this." She smiled, holding the lapel of the heavy coat like a treasure. "Thank you, Mr. Michael." He stood slowly, taking one last look at them, the fragile shapes of mother and child, framed by the dull glow of a city that had forgotten them. The air smelled of rain and iron. When he finally turned to leave, he felt the sound of her voice behind him, small and steady. "Good night, sir. And thank you for not being afraid of me." He walked back toward the main road, his shoes splashing through shallow puddles. The city lights shimmered on the water like tiny promises he was not sure he could keep. That night, in his penthouse overlooking the skyline, Michael sat alone with the sound of rain tapping the glass. On his table lay a small folded napkin, the one Lila had used to wipe the steam from her cup. He stared at it for a long time, realizing that for the first time in years, he felt something real. He had gone to buy coffee and returned with a question that would not leave him. What was the price of a man's heart, and who was truly rich enough to pay it? The following morning arrived gray and heavy with fog. Michael had not slept. He sat by the window of his apartment, staring down at the street 30 stories below, where people hurried with umbrellas and coffee cups. His mind kept returning to the bridge, to the image of the little girl curled beside her mother, under a threadbare blanket. Every detail haunted him, the way the rain had pooled around them, the sound of cars thundering overhead, the softness in Lila's voice when she said, "Thank you for not being afraid of me." Oh, he poured himself coffee that had long gone cold and pushed it aside. The penthouse was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. The stillness made him uneasy. It felt like standing inside a museum of a life that no longer belonged to him. Every surface gleamed, every corner perfect, and yet all he could see was the raw concrete of that bridge. By noon, he made up his mind. He pulled on another coat, the same color as the one he had left behind, and left the building. His driver was surprised to see him walking toward the street instead of waiting by the private garage. "Mr. Davenport, should I get the car?" the driver called out. "No," Michael said. "I need to walk." The air smelled of damp pavement and diesel. He followed the same route from the night before, his polished shoes splashing through puddles. When he reached the bridge, the sound of traffic echoed above like a restless heartbeat. He bent down and stepped beneath it. The blankets were still there, the coat folded neatly at the edge. The small lantern flickered faintly. The woman was awake this time, sitting upright and sipping from a tin cup. Lila sat beside her, braiding the frayed end of a piece of twine. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. "You came back," she said. Michael nodded. "I wanted to see how you both were doing." The mother straightened, wary but polite. "You did not have to," she said. "We do not take charity." "It is not charity," Michael said gently. "It is concern." She looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. "People only visit places like this when they feel guilty," she said. "Which one are you?" He met her gaze without flinching. "The guilty one," he said quietly. "But not for the reason you think." Lila tugged lightly at her mother's sleeve. "Mama, he is nice." He brought the warm coat. Her mother's expression softened a little. "I know, sweetheart. I just do not trust easily." "Oh," Michael understood. "You should not," he said. "Not everyone means well." He glanced around at the makeshift shelter, at the careful way they had arranged what little they owned. There was order even in the hardship. A small drawing hung from the wall of the bridge stick figures drawn in blue pen. A little girl holding hands with a tall man and a woman. "Did you draw this, Lila?" he asked. She nodded proudly. "That is me and Mama," she said, pointing. "And that is the man I will find one day." Michael smiled faintly. "He looks strong." "He is," she said, "because he keeps promises." Her mother looked down, blinking hard. "You should not fill your head with fairy tales, Lila," she whispered. "But Mama," Lila said softly, "sometimes people come back." The words struck Michael in a place he had not known was still tender. He cleared his throat. "Do you mind if I bring some food later?" The woman hesitated. "You really do not need to." I know," he said, "but I want to." After a moment she nodded. "If it makes you feel better, then fine." Lila grinned. "Can you bring apples? Mama likes the red ones that shine." "I will bring apples," Michael promised. He left soon after, walking back toward the city. But his steps were slower this time, heavier with thought. The fog had lifted, revealing the skyline in the distance sharp and bright against the dull sky. It reminded him of the first company he had built, the pride he once felt at the sight of success. Now it seemed hollow. That evening he returned with a grocery bag filled with fruit, soup cans, and bottled water. Lila clapped her hands when she saw him. "You really came back," she said. "Mama, he brought apples." Her mother managed a small smile. "You did not have to," she repeated. But this time her tone was softer. "I know," he said, "but it feels right." They ate together quietly. Lila divided everything carefully, as though hosting a guest. She insisted he take one of the apples for himself. "You cannot just give and not eat," she said. "That is unfair." He took a bite, surprised by how sweet it tasted. "You are right," he said. When the meal ended, Lila grew sleepy, her head resting against her mother's shoulder. The woman brushed a hand over her daughter's hair. "She should not have had to grow up like this," she said quietly. "But life does not ask what we deserve." "Oh." Michael looked at them, the child's small hand gripping her mother's coat. "Sometimes life gives us another chance," he said. "Maybe it is asking now." She looked at him, confused but curious. "Why do you care?" He paused, searching for words. "Because I think I failed someone once," he said. And I do not want to fail again. The woman nodded slowly. Then maybe you are not just the guilty one after all, she said. Michael smiled faintly. Maybe not. He left just before midnight, the city quiet around him. The sound of Lila's soft breathing followed him as he climbed back up to the street. For the first time in years, he felt lighter, though he carried nothing with him except the echo of a child's voice and the knowledge that something inside him had shifted beyond repair. As he walked home, he whispered to himself, "Tomorrow, I will make it right." And somewhere under that bridge, wrapped in a borrowed coat, a little girl dreamed of a world where $3 could truly buy love. The next morning, sunlight spilled gently across the marble counter of Michael's kitchen. It was the kind of light that usually signaled another busy day of meetings, deals, and voices through speakerphones. But that morning, his home felt strangely alive in a way it never had before. The sound of the city below mixed with the faint rhythm of memory, the soft laughter of a little girl, the clink of tin cups under a bridge, the hum of a world far humbler than his own. He stood by the window, sipping coffee that tasted faintly bitter, and looked down at the moving crowd. So many faces, none of them familiar. He realized he had built his life high above everyone else, where the air was clean but the heart went cold. By noon, he made another decision. It was not planned, not something an assistant could schedule. He called his office and told them to postpone all meetings for the day. "Personal matter," he said. That was all. An hour later, Michael's car pulled up near the bridge. He carried a small duffel bag, blankets, canned food, medicine, and a new lantern. As he approached the underpass, he could hear Lila's voice echoing faintly, singing a song off-key. She saw him first. "Mr. Michael!" she cried out, running to meet him. "You came again?" He smiled, setting the bag down carefully. "I brought some things that might help." Her mother appeared behind her, weary but steadier than before. "You did not need to do that," she said. Michael shook his head. "I wanted to." "May I come in?" The woman nodded slowly. "Of course." He stepped under the low concrete ceiling. The air smelled faintly of dampness and soap. Lila had arranged their small area neatly, the blankets folded, the lantern glowing softly in the corner. On the wall, a new drawing had appeared. 3 stick figures again. But now the tall man had a coat that looked suspiciously like his. Lila noticed his gaze and grinned. "That is you," she said proudly. "I added you to the family." Her mother sighed, a mix of amusement and quiet sadness. "She draws everything she wants to keep." Michael smiled. "Then I am honored." They spent the afternoon sorting through the supplies. Lila chattered as she worked, describing her favorite foods and the stories her mother used to tell when she was little. Her joy was disarming. It filled the cold space under the bridge with warmth that no heater could ever match. When they finished, Michael sat down beside the small lantern. The woman poured him tea from a dented kettle. "It is not much," she said, "but it is hot." He accepted it gratefully. "You have made this place more of a home than I have ever made mine," he said. She looked at him over the rim of her cup. "That is because you built yours for walls," she said quietly. "We build ours for each other." The words landed softly but stayed with him. He studied her face more closely, the lines of exhaustion, the faint resemblance to someone he could not yet place. "What was your name again?" he asked gently. "Angela," she said. "Angela Morris." The name hit him like a quiet bell. Morris. He remembered that name. Years ago, one of his companies had downsized during a restructuring. Dozens had been laid off, including a young woman named Angela Morris, who had been in charge of records and client support. She had written a letter asking to keep her job for a few months longer because of her pregnancy. The request had been denied by his management team. He had never met her, only signed the paper. Now, the paper had a face. He sat very still, his throat tightening. "Angela," he said slowly, "I think I knew you once. A long time ago." She frowned slightly. "I do not think so. I would have remembered someone like you." He hesitated. "You worked for a company called Davenport Holdings, correct?" Her eyes widened. "Yes, years ago, before everything changed." He nodded, his voice quiet. "I am Davenport." Silence filled the space. The hum of the traffic above seemed to fade into a hollow echo. Angela's face went pale. "You." she whispered. You were the one who let them take my job. I was 7 months pregnant. You signed the letter. Michael bowed his head. Yes, he said simply. I did. I did not know it was you. I did not know what it would cost you. Angela's voice trembled. It cost everything. Lila looked between them, confused. Mama? Angela drew a shaky breath, trying to steady herself. It is all right, sweetheart. It is just a long story. Michael's voice broke the silence. I cannot undo what happened, he said softly, but I can try to make things right now. Angela shook her head slowly. You cannot buy back years, she said. No, he agreed. But maybe I can help with the ones ahead. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the soft flutter of Lila's humming, unaware of the history unfolding around her. When the lantern flickered low, Michael stood. I will come back tomorrow, he said, if you will let me. Angela did not answer right away. Then she nodded once. If you mean it, come back with something stronger than words. I will, he said. He stepped out into the night, the chill wind tugging at his coat. The city glittered ahead, full of lights and power. But it felt smaller now, almost fragile. As he walked, one thought repeated in his mind: the woman under the bridge, the child with $3, and the signature that had once changed their lives. That night, Michael did not sleep again. He opened his laptop and began searching for something he had not looked for in years. Not profit, not expansion, but redemption. He knew where he would go the next morning. He just did not yet know whether forgiveness could ever be found. Morning arrived with a quiet mist rolling through the streets. The city, usually loud and alive, seemed to move slower that day. Michael sat at his desk, his laptop open but untouched. He had spent the night revisiting documents from years ago, emails, employee records, the termination letter bearing his digital signature. Each word felt like a bruise reopening. He saw her name again, printed plainly across the page, Angela Morris. He closed the laptop. His reflection in the glass window looked older, heavier. He had built an empire by separating emotion from decision, but now emotion was the only thing left. The sound of Lila's laughter from the night before echoed in his head. It was strange how a child's voice could reach places that logic never could. He packed a small bag again, fresh clothes, new shoes for Lila, some food, and envelopes containing money he did not know how to offer without insulting. Redemption, he thought, could never be bought, but kindness might open a door. By the time he reached the bridge, the morning traffic had thickened above. The sound of engines rumbled like thunder. The space beneath was empty. The blankets were gone, the lantern gone. Even the small drawing on the wall had disappeared. Michael froze. He called out softly. Lila? No answer. Angela? His voice echoed back at him. Panic gripped him. He looked around for signs, footprints, discarded wrappers, anything. A nearby vendor saw him and pointed down the road. You looking for that woman and the kid? Ambulance came early this morning, the man said. Michael's chest tightened. Where did they take them? Hospital. St. Mary's, I think. The mother fainted. He thanked the man and hurried toward the street, waving down a cab. The driver glanced at him through the mirror as he climbed in. You all right, sir? Just drive, Michael said. His voice cracked despite his effort to stay calm. At St. Mary's Hospital, the halls smelled of antiseptic and coffee. The receptionist looked up as he approached. A woman named Angela Morris, he said quickly, and her daughter Lila. She typed for a moment. Room 12, East Wing. She was admitted this morning. The child is with her. Michael walked down the corridor, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. When he reached the door, he paused before opening it. Inside, the room was small but warm. Angela lay in the bed, pale but breathing evenly. Lila sat beside her, swinging her legs from the chair. Lila looked up first and smiled. Mr. Michael, you found us. He exhaled, relief flooding his chest. I was afraid you were gone. We are okay, she said. Mama just got really sleepy. The people here are nice. They gave me cereal. Angela stirred, her eyes opening slowly. When she saw him, she blinked in disbelief. You came, she whispered. I said I would, he answered. She tried to sit up. He gently helped adjust the pillow behind her. You should rest, he said softly. Angela studied his face. You look worse than me, she said with a faint smile. He chuckled quietly. Maybe I am the one who needed a hospital. Her smile faded, and her voice grew serious. Why are you doing all this? Michael hesitated. Because I cannot stop thinking about what I did, about what that letter took from you, about what you and your daughter have lived through because of me. Angela turned her head toward the window. That was a long time ago. Not for me, he said. For me it was yesterday. Oh. The room fell silent except for the steady beep of a monitor. Lila hummed quietly to herself, tracing shapes on the bedside sheet with her finger. Michael reached into his coat and took out an envelope. This is not to buy forgiveness, he said. It is only to make things easier. It is enough for a place to stay, food, and whatever care you need. Angela looked at the envelope but did not take it. You cannot fix everything with money. I know, he said, but maybe it can help you breathe while I figure out how to do more. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. All right. For her, not for me. Lila leaned forward. Does that mean we can get a real room? With walls and a door? Angela smiled faintly. Yes, sweetheart, maybe. Michael felt a lump rise in his throat. I will make sure of it, he said. He spent the afternoon filling out hospital forms and arranging a temporary stay at a nearby apartment. Angela protested at first, but he was gentle and firm. It is only until you are strong again, he told her. When everything was set, he returned to the hospital room. Lila was asleep now, her head resting on her mother's lap. Angela stroked her hair absent-mindedly. She trusts you, Angela said quietly. Michael looked down at the little girl, the rise and fall of her chest steady and peaceful. I am not sure I deserve that, he said. Angela met his eyes. Maybe none of us deserve the things that save us, she said. Sometimes we just accept them. He nodded slowly. Then I will accept this second chance. Before he left, he placed a red apple on the bedside table. For when she wakes up, he said. Angela smiled faintly. You remembered. I remember everything now, he said. Outside the hospital, the evening light broke through the clouds, turning the wet streets into ribbons of gold. For the first time in years, Michael did not rush back to his office. He walked instead, feeling the weight of his choices and the fragile hope that had somehow survived them. Behind him, in room 12, a little girl dreamed beneath the soft hum of hospital machines. And for the first time since she had been born, her mother did not worry about the night. There was warmth, there was safety, and somewhere above the city, there was a man quietly learning how to be human again. 3 days passed, and the hospital room began to fill with light instead of worry. Angela's cheeks had regained color, and Lila's laughter drifted down the hallway every morning like music that made nurses smile. Michael visited every day, never empty-handed. Sometimes he brought fruit, sometimes books, sometimes just quiet company. He no longer came as a billionaire in a suit, but as a man learning how to show up without being asked. On the 4th morning, he arrived early and found Lila drawing by the window. The city outside shimmered under the winter Sunday. She was humming softly, her pencil moving across the paper. When she noticed him, her face lit up. Mr. Michael, look, I made us breakfast. On the paper, she had drawn 3 stick figures, sitting at a table with toast, apples, and 2 cups of cocoa. That looks delicious, he said, smiling. Who made the cocoa? You did, she answered, grinning. Mama says you make it the fancy way. Angela laughed from the bed. He does not even know how to use a coffee pot, she teased. Michael raised his hands. Guilty, he said, but I can learn. The lightness between them felt fragile but genuine. It was a rhythm they were all still discovering, how to talk without fear, how to laugh without pretending that pain never happened. Later that afternoon, Angela was discharged from the hospital. Michael had already arranged for a small apartment near a park, modest but clean, with 2 bedrooms and a kitchen that smelled faintly of new paint. He helped them settle in quietly, unpacking boxes and fixing a stubborn cabinet hinge, while Lila bounced from room to room, announcing, "We have walls! We really have walls!" Angela stood in the doorway, watching her daughter's excitement. I do not know how to thank you, she said softly. Michael shook his head. You do not have to. I owed you more than this. She looked at him, her eyes gentle but steady. I am not asking for debt. I am asking what comes next. Are you doing this to feel better or to be better? He paused, absorbing her words. I do not know yet, he admitted. Maybe both. Angela nodded slowly. Then let us see where it goes. That evening, he stayed for dinner. It was simple soup and bread, but to Lila it felt like a feast. She insisted they use the good bowls the landlord had left. She even folded napkins and placed one by each seat. Because nice things deserve manners, she said proudly. After dinner, Angela washed dishes while Michael helped Lila with her reading workbook. She stumbled over a few words, then looked up. "Mr. Michael, do you have a dad?" He hesitated, the question catching him off guard. "Not anymore," he said quietly. "He passed away a long time ago." "Was he kind?" she asked. Michael stared at the book for a moment before answering. "He was strict. He wanted me to be strong. But he also used to carry me on his shoulders when I was small. I remember that part more." Lila smiled. "Then you can remember the good parts. Mama says that is how people stay alive in your heart." Her words felt older than her age, shaped by too many nights of learning hope in the dark. Michael felt a lump rise in his throat but kept his voice steady. "Your mother is a very wise woman," he said. When the dishes were done, Angela joined them on the couch. They sat together in quiet comfort while the small apartment glowed with lamplight. Lila leaned against her mother's arm, eyes heavy with sleep. "Can you read me something?" she murmured. Michael picked up one of the storybooks he had brought. The pages were worn, the colors faded, but the words were still full of magic. His voice filled the room, deep and gentle, telling a story about a fox who wanted to find its way home. By the time he reached the last page, Lila was asleep. Angela whispered, "She has not fallen asleep this easily in months." Michael closed the book carefully. "Maybe she finally feels safe." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the quiet hum of the heater and the steady rhythm of rain beginning outside. Angela spoke softly. "I used to work for your company because I believed it stood for something good. I thought success meant safety, but I learned that people can forget what goodness feels like when they climb too high." Michael nodded slowly. "I forgot," he admitted, "until your daughter reminded me." She smiled faintly. "She has that effect on people." He looked at Lila, her small hand still resting on the open page. "I think she might change more than just people," he said. Angela leaned back, tired but peaceful. "Maybe she already has." "Lou." Before leaving that night, Michael tucked the blanket around Lila and placed the $3 bills she once carried on the table beside her bed. He had found them in his coat pocket earlier, folded neatly as if they had waited for the right moment to return. Angela noticed and looked up. "You kept them?" He nodded. "They reminded me of value." When he stepped outside, the rain had turned into snow. The air was crisp, and the city lights shimmered like reflections on glass. Michael walked slowly, his thoughts quiet but clear. For the first time in years, he was not thinking about numbers, markets, or competition. He was thinking about soup that tasted better than any meal money could buy, about laughter that came without effort, and about a child who had taught him that redemption did not always arrive through apology, it arrived through presence. Somewhere behind him, in the small apartment above the street, a mother and her daughter slept in warmth, their world no longer measured by what they lacked, but by who had finally decided to stay. The next morning arrived with sunlight spilling through the thin curtains of the small apartment. The scent of coffee filled the kitchen, mingling with the faint hum of a radio that played an old soul song. Angela stood by the counter, wearing one of the soft sweaters Michael had brought the day before. Her movements were slow but steady, as if her body was learning to trust peace again. Lila sat at the small table, swinging her legs and spreading jam carefully across a slice of bread. When she saw Michael at the doorway, she waved the butter knife like a flag. "You are late for breakfast," she announced. Michael smiled. "I thought I was early." "Oh, early is when the toast is still hot," she said, handing him a plate. Angela laughed softly. "She has rules for everything now. Yesterday she told me the couch has to be the storytelling seat, because you sat there to read." "Then I will sit there again tonight," Michael said. He joined them at the table, the smell of coffee grounding him in a way boardrooms never could. For a few minutes, there was only the quiet sound of forks and the soft scrape of toast. Then Lila asked, "Mr. Michael, do you have to go to work today?" He hesitated. "Not this morning." "Good," she said, "because we are going to the park." Angela looked up. "The park?" Lila nodded eagerly. "You said we have a park near here. You promised we would see it when Mama felt strong enough. She feels strong today." Angela smiled at her daughter's excitement. I suppose we could take a walk. The air will do us good. Michael stood. Then it is settled. I will drive. The park was only 10 minutes away, tucked between tall apartment buildings and a small church. The trees were bare for winter, their branches stretching toward a pale blue sky. The air was crisp and smelled faintly of pine and earth. Lila ran ahead, her laughter ringing through the cold morning. Angela walked slowly, her arm linked with Michael's for balance on the icy path. It feels strange, she said softly. Being outside without worry. Michael looked at her. You deserve more days like this. She smiled faintly. We will see. Lila found a bench near the pond and climbed onto it, spreading her arms like a conductor. This is the quietest orchestra in the world, she declared. Listen. They listened. The wind moved gently through the branches, and somewhere a dog barked in the distance. The stillness felt sacred. After a while, Lila pointed toward the pond. There are ducks, she said. Can we feed them? Michael reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small paper bag. Already prepared, he said, handing it to her. Breadcrumbs. Angela laughed. You planned this? Maybe I am learning how to think ahead in better ways, he said. Lila scattered the crumbs, watching the ducks glide closer. Her face glowed with delight. They trust me, she said proudly. See? They know I will not hurt them. Michael nodded. That is because kindness speaks louder than words. Oh. Angela turned to him. You talk like someone who has lived a long time with silence. He met her eyes. Maybe I have. They walked a little more before sitting on a bench near the path. Lila stayed by the pond, humming quietly as she tossed the last bits of bread. Angela's voice grew low. She thinks this is temporary, she said. She keeps asking if we will have to go back to the bridge when you get busy again. Michael looked down at his hands. I do not plan to get too busy again, he said. Not the same way. I am trying to change things at work, in myself. Angela studied him carefully. Change is easy to promise, she said gently. Harder to live. I know, he said. That is why I'm here instead of in a meeting right now. She smiled softly. Then maybe you are already changing. They stayed until the sun began to dip lower in the sky. Lila returned to them, cheeks flushed from running. Can we come again tomorrow? She asked. Of course, Michael said. On the drive home, Lila fell asleep in the back seat, her small head leaning against the window. The car was filled with a comfortable quiet. Angela looked out at the passing streets, her voice thoughtful. You know, she has not slept this peacefully since before we lost our home. Michael's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Then I am glad I was here to see it. Arsit. When they reached the apartment, he carried Lila inside, careful not to wake her. He laid her gently on the couch, the storytelling seat, and covered her with a blanket. She murmured something in her sleep that sounded like his name. Angela watched from the doorway. She trusts you more than anyone. He turned to her. That is what scares me, he said quietly. Because I am still learning how to be someone worth trusting. Angela walked closer. Then keep learning, she said. That is all any of us can do. Michael nodded. He looked around the apartment, the drawings on the fridge, the folded blankets, the light spilling across the walls, and felt something settle deep inside him. It was not guilt anymore. It was purpose. Before he left, he placed his business card on the table beside the $3 bills. If anything happens, call me anytime, he said. Angela looked at the card, then at him. You really mean that? I do, he said. For both of you. As he stepped outside, snow began to fall again, soft and silent. He tilted his head back and let a few flakes land on his face. The world looked cleaner somehow, as if forgiveness had begun to gather in the air. Inside, Lila stirred and whispered in her sleep. $3 is enough. Her small voice fading into the warmth of the home that finally belonged to her. The next morning came with soft rain that blurred the windows of the small apartment. The air smelled of wet pavement and coffee. Angela sat at the kitchen table, sorting through the few papers the hospital had given her: medical notes, receipts, and a letter offering a free health checkup at the community clinic. Lila was by the window, tracing the fog on the glass with her fingertip, drawing tiny hearts that slowly disappeared. Michael knocked lightly before entering. He carried a grocery bag in one hand and a box of books in the other. His coat was damp from the rain, his hair slightly disheveled. "I hope I am not too early," he said. Angela looked up and smiled faintly. "You are right on time. Lila just finished breakfast." Lila turned and waved. "Mr. Michael, I made toast without burning it this time." He grinned. "That is progress. Soon you will be a chef." Angela shook her head with amusement. "She already thinks she is." He set the groceries down on the counter and handed Angela an envelope. "I found these records in the old company files," he said carefully. "They confirm your employment history and the benefits you were supposed to receive when you were let go. I have already contacted Human Resources to release what was owed to you back then with interest." Angela's hands froze over the papers. "You did not have to do that," she said softly. "I did," he said. "It was my responsibility." For a long moment, she said nothing. The sound of the rain filled the silence. Then she nodded slowly. "Thank you," she whispered. Lila looked between them, confused but curious. "Are we rich now?" Angela smiled. "Not rich, sweetheart. Just a little safer." Lila thought for a moment, then said, "Safe is better than rich." Michael met Angela's eyes and nodded. "Yes, it is." After a quiet breakfast, Angela decided to rest. She had been feeling tired again, her energy fading faster than she admitted. Lila sat beside her on the couch, reading aloud from one of the books Michael had brought. Her small voice filled the room, steady and clear, as her mother drifted into sleep. Michael watched from the kitchen table, the pages of a newspaper open before him, but unread. He found himself studying the two of them, the way Angela's hand still rested protectively on her daughter's knee even as she slept, and the way Lila's braids moved slightly as she leaned closer to the page. It was a portrait of tenderness he had not seen since childhood. It stirred something inside him that words could not reach. When Lila finished reading, she looked up and whispered, "She is sleeping again." Michael nodded. "Let her rest. She needs it." Lila came over to him, her voice lowering. "Sometimes I get scared when she sleeps too long, but then she always wakes up." "She will wake up," he said gently, "and we will make sure she gets stronger." Lila smiled, trusting him completely. "You always say things that sound true," she said, "even when they hurt a little." He smiled back, humbled by her honesty. "That is because truth can heal, even when it stings." The rest of the day passed quietly. In the afternoon, Michael drove to a nearby pharmacy and returned with vitamins, fruit, and a bouquet of white lilies. Angela scolded him lightly for spending too much, but she placed the flowers in a glass jar anyway. "They make the room feel alive," she admitted. That evening, rain turned into snow again. The apartment lights glowed warm against the gray outside. Michael helped Lila with her reading, and Angela prepared soup, humming softly to herself. When the meal was ready, they ate together like a small family. Halfway through dinner, Lila looked up and asked, "Mr. Michael, what did you want to be when you were little?" He paused, surprised. "I wanted to build things," he said. "Houses, maybe. I like drawing them." Did you build any?" He smiled faintly. "I built buildings, but not homes. There is a difference." Angela looked at him thoughtfully. "You could still build one," she said quietly. He glanced at her, not sure how to respond. "Maybe I already am," he said after a moment. Later, after Lila had gone to bed, Angela and Michael sat by the window, watching the snow fall. "She likes you," Angela said softly. "I can see it in how she looks at you." Michael nodded slowly. "I like her too. She reminds me of everything I forgot about being human." Angela turned toward him. "She has that gift. She finds light in anyone." He hesitated, then asked, "How long have you been sick, Angela?" She sighed. "Since before she was born. It comes and goes. The doctors said stress made it worse." He felt a pang of guilt. "Then I made it worse," he said quietly. "You are helping now," she said. "That is what matters." They sat in silence, the snow falling heavier outside. The city lights blurred into soft halos of gold and white. When Michael finally stood to leave, Angela walked him to the door. "Thank you for today," she said. He shook his head. "No. Thank you for letting me come back." She smiled faintly. "Be careful out there, Mr. Michael." "I will," he said. As he stepped into the hallway, he glanced back through the doorway one last time. Inside, the apartment looked warm and alive. The little girl was asleep, the mother resting beside her. It was the picture of a peace he had never been able to buy. Outside, snow covered the city like a clean page. He walked slowly through it, his footprints marking a path that felt new and uncertain but right. For the first time in many years, he did not feel like a man running from guilt. He felt like a man walking towards something better, something small, fragile, and completely human. The snow had not melted by the next morning. It blanketed the city in quiet white, softening every sound. Michael stood outside the small apartment building with a paper bag of groceries in his hands. His breath rose in faint clouds as he looked up at the second-floor window, where light glowed softly through the curtains. It had become part of his morning now to stop by, to bring something simple, and to remind himself that goodness did not have to be grand. When Angela opened the door, the smell of oatmeal and cinnamon drifted out. Lila ran forward, her socks sliding on the floor. "Mr. Michael," she called, "you brought breakfast again." He laughed. "I am starting to think you expect it now." She nodded proudly. "Yes, because you always come back." Angela smiled from the kitchen. "You are spoiling her," she said gently. "But I will admit, it is nice to have warm bread again." Michael set the bag on the table and took off his gloves. "You deserve more than bread," he said. "You both do." Angela shook her head. "We have enough. That is new for us. Enough is good." They ate together, as they often did now, the rhythm of their mornings growing familiar. After breakfast, Lila went to her corner with crayons and paper while Angela folded laundry. Michael lingered near the small shelf that held a few of their belongings. A framed photograph caught his attention, a picture of Angela, years younger, holding a baby, wrapped in a soft blue blanket. Next to it lay a half-broken bracelet with small silver beads. Angela noticed his gaze. "It broke the day Lila was born," she said. "It was supposed to be a set." Her father had the other half. Michael picked it up carefully. "It looks like something handmade," he said. "It was," she replied. "We could not afford anything expensive, but he said it meant connection, that no matter what happened, we would always find our way back to each other." Michael looked at the delicate beads in his hand. "And did he?" Angela's smile faded a little. "No, he left before she took her first steps. Sometimes life breaks people before poverty ever can." There was a pause. Lila's humming filled the silence, light and innocent. Michael turned the bracelet over once more and noticed a faint engraving on the inside, a date and a name. The date was almost a decade old. The name was one he recognized, his own last name. Davenport. He froze. "Angela," he said slowly. "Where did he get this bracelet?" She looked up, puzzled. "Why?" "Because this design," he said carefully, "was custom. My mother used to make these for charity years ago. Only a few existed." Angela frowned. "He said a woman from an office gave it to him as thanks for something he did." "I never asked more." Michael's heartbeat quickened. The coincidence felt impossible, yet the engraving was there. He turned it toward her. "This was my mother's work," he said quietly. "She passed away before Lila was born, but she used to tell me that every gift we give finds its way home." Angela stared at the bracelet for a long moment. "Maybe she was right," she whispered. The room grew still. The bracelet in his palm seemed to shimmer faintly in the morning light. Lila skipped over, holding a drawing. "Look, I drew us all together again." She pointed at the paper, where 3 stick figures stood beneath a shining Sunday. "That is you, Mama, and Mr. Michael. You are holding hands." Angela smiled, brushing a tear from her eye. "It is beautiful, sweetheart." Michael crouched beside her. "You are quite the artist," he said. Lila tilted her head. "Are we like a family now?" Angela inhaled sharply. Michael hesitated. The question hung between them, fragile but honest. He looked at Angela. "That depends on what your mother says," he answered gently. Angela met his eyes, unsure how to respond. "We are something," she said softly. "Something kind." "Well," Lila nodded, satisfied with that answer. "Then I will draw us like that every time," she said, skipping back to her crayons. Michael stood, still holding the bracelet. "Would you mind if I fix this?" he asked. "There is a jeweler I know who can restore it. Angela hesitated. You would do that? I want to, he said. Some things deserve to be whole again. She looked at him for a long time, then nodded. All right, but only if you bring it back. I promise, he said. Later that afternoon, as he left the apartment, he could not stop looking at the bracelet. It felt like a thread tying the past to the present, one that had waited patiently for years. At his office, his assistant stared when he arrived without a tie and carrying a small velvet pouch instead of a briefcase. Sir, the board meeting. Reshidula it, Michael said. The assistant blinked. All of it? Yes, he said. All of it. Oh. He went to the jeweler, a quiet man who had worked for his family for decades. The man examined the bracelet under a bright lamp. This is your mother's work, he said softly. She made these when you were a boy. Michael nodded. Can you fix it? With care, yes, the jeweler said. But it will take time. Take whatever time it needs, Michael replied. It is important. When he left the shop, he felt lighter, as if something inside him had begun to mend alongside the bracelet. That evening, he stood once more outside Angela's apartment. Snowflakes drifted through the air like quiet confessions. Through the window, he could see Lila dancing in the glow of the small lamp, her laughter spilling into the night. He smiled, realizing that sometimes redemption did not arrive with grand gestures or public apologies. Sometimes it came in the shape of a small silver bracelet, a reminder that broken things could be made whole, and that kindness, once given, had a way of finding its way home. The following evening arrived, wrapped in winter stillness. The city lights shimmered across the wet pavement as Michael walked toward the small apartment building, the repaired bracelet tucked carefully inside his coat pocket. The snow had stopped falling, but the air still carried the quiet aftertaste of cold. Every step he took echoed faintly in the alley, as though the night itself was listening. When Angela opened the door, he was greeted by warmth, the smell of soup on the stove, and the faint hum of Lila singing from the next room. You came back, Angela said with a soft smile. I said I would, he replied. He removed his gloves, revealing the small velvet pouch in his hand. And I brought something you might want to see. Angela's eyebrows lifted slightly. You fixed it? Michael nodded. Yes, the jeweler remembered my mother's work. He repaired every link and polished it carefully. It looks almost new. He opened the pouch and placed the bracelet in her palm. The silver beads glimmered under the kitchen light, the engraved date now clear again. Angela traced her fingers along the chain, her voice trembling. I never thought I would see it whole again, she whispered. It deserves another story, he said quietly. So do you. Ah. Lila came running into the room, her braids bouncing. What is that, Mama? Angela smiled and crouched to show her. It is my old bracelet. Mr. Michael helped fix it. Lila's eyes widened. It is shiny. Can I touch it? Angela nodded, and Lila held it gently, turning it in her small hands. It looks like it has little stars, she said. It does, Michael said. They shine again because someone cared enough to make them new. Lila grinned and handed it back. Then you should wear it, Mama. Maybe it will keep us lucky. Angela fastened it around her wrist, and for a moment, the three of them stood quietly together, the small sound of the clasp clicking into place feeling almost sacred. They sat down to dinner soon after. The soup was simple, carrots, potatoes, and chicken, but to Michael, it tasted richer than any meal from a restaurant. As they ate, Angela asked, How was your day? He hesitated. Strange, he said honestly. I spent the morning at the office, but everything felt different. I looked at those people, those numbers, and I realized how disconnected I had been for so long. I built walls so high that I forgot there were people living below them. Angela listened quietly. Maybe you were afraid of looking down, she said. Because when you look down, you have to see what you stepped over. Her words landed gently but deeply. He nodded slowly. I think you are right. Oh. After dinner, Lila insisted on reading to them from her storybook. She perched on the couch with her small legs tucked under her and began reading with dramatic pauses, making both adults smile. When she stumbled on a word, Michael helped her pronounce it, his tone patient and kind. Angela watched them from the table, her heart swelling quietly. There was something natural in the way he looked at her daughter without pity, without hesitation, only care. For the first time in years, she felt the space between gratitude and trust beginning to close. When the story ended, Lila clapped her hands and said proudly, "That was my best reading yet." Michael laughed. "It was perfect." Angela stood and kissed her daughter's forehead. "Bedtime, little one." Lila groaned, but obeyed. "Good night, Mama." "Good night, Mr. Michael." He smiled. "Good night, Lila." When she disappeared into the bedroom, the apartment grew quiet again. Angela cleared the dishes while Michael watched the snow begin to fall once more through the window. She spoke softly as she rinsed the bowls. "You know, I used to dream about peace. Not luxury or success, just peace. The kind where I could breathe without wondering what would break next." He turned toward her. "And now?" She looked at him, her eyes calm. "Now I think I am learning to breathe again." Michael exhaled slowly, as though he had been holding his own breath for years. "I am learning too," he said. "Maybe we can keep learning together." Angela smiled faintly. "Maybe we can." Before leaving that night, he reached for the bracelet again and brushed his fingers over it lightly. "It suits you," he said. "It looks like it was always meant to find its way back." Angela looked at him with quiet gratitude. "Maybe everything good finds its way back eventually," she said. Michael nodded. "If we let it." He turned to go, but she stopped him at the door. "Michael," she said softly, "whatever you are searching for, I hope you find it." He looked at her, then at the faint light reflecting from the bracelet on her wrist. "Maybe I already have," he said. Outside, the snow deepened, blanketing the city in silver silence. The streets glowed under the lamplight, and the sound of laughter drifted faintly from somewhere far away. Michael walked slowly, his thoughts full and steady. He had spent his life chasing meaning in grand gestures and impossible achievements. But tonight, he realized that meaning had been waiting quietly in a repaired bracelet, in a small kitchen filled with warmth, and in the trust of a little girl who once thought that $3 could buy a father. For the first time in decades, he did not feel lost. He felt found. The next morning began with a sharp chill in the air. The storm from the night before had passed, leaving behind clean skies and streets covered in a thin layer of frost. Michael woke before dawn in his penthouse, but the view outside his tall windows no longer gave him comfort. The skyline, once a symbol of success, now looked distant and hollow. He could not stop thinking about the warmth of Angela's small kitchen, the sound of Lila reading aloud, and the light that danced across the silver bracelet on her mother's wrist. He poured himself coffee but did not drink it. His calendar on the tablet glowed with meetings, negotiations, and reminders, all color-coded and precise, yet none of them seemed to matter. He closed the device and reached for his coat instead. He had somewhere more important to be. When he arrived at the apartment, the morning sun was spilling through the hallway windows. Lila opened the door before he could knock. "Mr. Michael, you are early," she said brightly. "I could not wait for breakfast," he said, smiling. Angela appeared behind her, tying her robe. "You are starting to make this a habit," she teased gently. He shrugged. "Some habits are worth keeping." Angela motioned for him to come in. The scent of pancakes filled the room. Lila was already setting 3 plates at the table. "I made these," she announced proudly. Michael looked impressed. "You are becoming quite the chef." She told me she was practicing for when we open our own cafe," Angela said, pouring coffee. Lila nodded seriously. "Mama will cook, I will draw the menu, and you can be the taster." Michael laughed softly. "That sounds like a job I can handle." They ate together while the sunlight warmed the small kitchen. It felt easy now, natural. There were no more long silences or unspoken questions. The walls that once existed between them had slowly melted away. After breakfast, Angela went to rest on the couch. The fatigue from her illness still lingered, though she tried to hide it. Lila pulled out her crayons and began drawing at the table. Michael helped her color a sun in the corner of the paper. "Why does the sun always have to be yellow?" he asked. "Because it is happy," she said, looking at him as if the answer were obvious. He smiled. "Then what color is sadness?" "Gray," she said after thinking for a moment. "But gray is not bad. It means you are waiting for happy to come back." Michael paused, absorbing her words. She said them so simply, yet they carried the kind of truth that adults often forget. "You are very wise for someone your age," he said softly. Lila shrugged. "Mama says people who see hard things learn to see hearts better." Before he could respond, a soft cough came from the couch. Angela sat up slowly, pressing a hand to her chest. "I am fine," she said quickly when she saw his concern. "Just a little tired." Michael stood. "Maybe you should see a doctor again," he said. "I can make an appointment today." Angela shook her head. "No hospitals for a while. I just need rest." He did not argue, but made a silent note to speak to her later about it. That afternoon, Lila convinced him to take her to the library nearby. They walked together through the neighborhood, the air crisp and filled with the smell of roasted nuts from a street vendor. Lila skipped ahead, holding his hand, humming a tune she had made up herself. For a man who had once been surrounded by noise, this simple sound felt like peace. Inside the library, Lila ran her fingers along the rows of books, eyes wide with wonder. "There are so many stories here," she whispered. Michael smiled. "Maybe one day there will be a story about you." She giggled. "Only if you promise to read it." He bent slightly to meet her eyes. "I promise." They spent hours there. Lila sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through picture books, while Michael found a chair near her. He read in silence but kept glancing up, watching the way she smiled at every new page. When they returned home, the light outside had turned golden. Angela was sitting by the window with a blanket draped over her legs. She looked tired, but peaceful. "Did you two have fun?" she asked. Lila nodded excitedly. "We found a book about a fox who wanted to buy a star. It reminded me of when I wanted to buy a dad." Angela and Michael exchanged a quiet look. Lila continued, her voice soft but sure. "The fox learned that some things are too special to buy. You just have to find them." Michael felt his throat tighten. "That sounds like a smart fox," he said. Angela reached over and touched her daughter's hair. "And a wise little girl who understood him." As evening fell, Michael stayed to help prepare dinner. The radio played softly in the background, filling the apartment with warmth. Lila set the table again, humming happily. Angela watched the two of them together and felt a wave of gratitude she could not put into words. After dinner, when Lila had gone to bed, Michael lingered at the door. "You should let me take you to the doctor tomorrow," he said gently. "You have been coughing more." Angela sighed. "I will think about it." "Promise me," he said quietly. She met his eyes and nodded. "I promise." Before he left, she said, "Michael, thank you for all of this." He shook his head. "You do not owe me thanks. You and Lila have given me something money never could." She smiled faintly. "You mean peace?" He paused at the doorway. "Peace," he repeated softly, "and purpose." When he stepped outside, the night air was cold but calm. The city lights shimmered like scattered stars, and for the first time, Michael did not feel like an outsider in the world below them. He walked slowly, each breath steady and full. Somewhere behind him, in a small apartment filled with love, a mother and her daughter were asleep, and for once, he believed that tomorrow could actually be better than today. The next day began with sunlight pressing through thin clouds, the kind that hinted at spring even though winter had not yet released its grip. Michael woke early again, unable to shake the habit of checking on the little apartment that had become his quiet refuge. The city below was still half asleep, but his thoughts were already there with Angela and Lila, wondering if they were awake, wondering if Angela had kept her promise about the doctor. When he arrived, the door was already open. The smell of oatmeal and vanilla filled the hall. Lila's laughter spilled into the air like music. "Mr. Michael, we made pancakes," she announced as soon as he stepped inside. Michael smiled. "That sounds like the best kind of welcome." "Oh." Angela appeared from the kitchen, her hair loosely tied, her skin pale but glowing. "We saved you a plate," she said softly. "And before you ask, yes, I made the appointment." He let out a breath of relief he did not know he was holding. "Good. I am proud of you." She rolled her eyes lightly. "You sound like a parent." "Maybe I am practicing," he said with a small grin. They sat together at the table. Lila piled her pancakes high with fruit, giggling every time syrup dripped down the sides. "You have to eat them fast," she said seriously. "That is the rule." Michael laughed. "I will try to follow it." The morning felt easy, like a rhythm they had all quietly agreed upon. Angela told stories from her youth about summers at the lake and the music she used to love. Michael listened, smiling at how her voice softened when she spoke of better times. After breakfast, Angela excused herself to rest before the doctor's visit. Michael offered to take Lila to the park again. Angela hesitated. "Are you sure you do not mind?" He shook his head. "I would not miss it." Outside, the air was crisp and bright. The park was busier than before. Children bundled in coats, dogs chasing sticks across the grass. Lila ran ahead, her scarf fluttering behind her. "Race you to the pond," she shouted. Michael laughed and jogged after her. She was fast, her small feet leaving soft prints in the thin snow. When he caught up, they stood together at the edge of the frozen pond, watching the ducks huddle near the open water. "Mr. Michael," Lila said quietly, "do you think people can change?" He looked down at her. "Yes," he said, "but it takes courage, and sometimes help." She nodded thoughtfully. "Mama says people do not really change. They just remember who they were before life got loud." Michael smiled faintly. "Your mother is a wise woman." Lila picked up a stick and traced shapes in the snow. "Mama used to sing when we still had a house," she said softly. "But she stopped. Maybe she will sing again soon." "I think she will," he said gently. "Some songs just wait for the right moment." She smiled. "Maybe you can help her remember." For a moment, he did not answer. The idea touched something deep inside him, something he was afraid to name. When they returned home, Angela was sitting by the window, dressed and ready. "The clinic called," she said. "They can see me this afternoon." "I will take you," Michael said without hesitation. Angela looked unsure. "You have work." He cut her off softly. "This is more important." The clinic was small but welcoming, with posters about heart health and kindness pinned on the walls. While Angela met with the doctor, Michael waited with Lila in the lobby. The little girl read quietly from a children's magazine, occasionally glancing up at him. "Do you think Mama will be okay?" she asked. He placed a reassuring hand over hers. "Yes," he said gently. "She is stronger than she thinks." An hour later, Angela came out holding a small folder of test results. Her face was calm, but her eyes held something heavy. Michael stood quickly. "What did they say?" She forced a smile. "They need to run more tests," she said. "Nothing to worry about yet." But he saw the flicker of fear she tried to hide. He nodded slowly. "Then we will take it one step at a time." On the way home, Lila fell asleep in the back seat. The hum of the car filled the silence between the adults. Angela finally spoke. "You do not have to keep doing this," she said quietly. "Taking care of us, carrying us." Michael kept his eyes on the road. "You are not a burden, Angela. You never were." She looked out the window. "You do not understand. I was angry for years, angry at people like you. I blamed you for everything I lost. And now," he finished for her, "now you have to forgive me to move forward." Angela turned to him, her eyes soft. "No," she said. "Now I have to forgive myself for surviving." Her words lingered between them like a truth neither had expected. When they reached the apartment, the city was painted gold by the setting sun. Michael carried Lila inside and placed her gently on the couch. Angela stood at the doorway, watching him with quiet gratitude. "Thank you," she said. He looked up. "For what?" "For showing up," she said. "People talk about kindness, but few ever stay long enough to mean it." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that is what I am learning to stay." That night, as he walked home under the fading light, he felt something shift within him. The world had not changed, but he had. Success no longer felt like the measure of his life. Connection did. In a small apartment across town, a little girl dreamed beside her mother, clutching a drawing of 3 figures under a bright yellow Sunday. And somewhere deep inside both women's hearts, the color gray was finally beginning to fade. The following week unfolded slowly, each day blending into the next with a rhythm that felt both fragile and full of hope. The snow began to melt, leaving small puddles that reflected the sky like broken mirrors. Michael continued his visits, sometimes bringing groceries, sometimes books, and sometimes nothing at all but quiet company. For Angela and Lila, his presence had become a steady part of their lives, like morning light that returned no matter how cold the night had been. One morning, Michael arrived earlier than usual. Angela was sitting by the window, her hair brushed neatly, a cup of tea in her hand. The sunlight framed her face, softening the fatigue beneath her eyes. Lila sat on the floor nearby, building a tower out of old cereal boxes. "Mr. Michael, look," Lila exclaimed. "It is a castle, but it needs a flag." He smiled. "Every castle needs a flag. I think I have something that might work." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded napkin. Lila gasped with delight and immediately taped it to the top of her tower. "Now it is perfect," she declared. Angela laughed quietly. "You are turning her imagination into architecture," she said. "I think she already had the blueprint," he replied, glancing at the fragile structure. They shared breakfast together as usual. But something in Angela's demeanor that morning was different. She was quieter, thoughtful. When Lila ran to her room to grab her coat, Angela turned to Michael. "The doctor called this morning," she said softly. Michael's expression changed. "What did they say?" "They found something in the scans," she said. "They want to run more tests next week. It might be serious." He felt a chill settle in his chest. "Angela," he began, but she raised a hand. "I do not want pity," she said. "I just want to prepare. If it gets worse, I need to know that Lila will be all right." Michael met her eyes, steady and full of quiet conviction. "She will be, I promise you that." Angela looked down, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "Do not make promises you cannot keep, Michael. I have learned not to trust those." He leaned forward slightly. "Then I will make one I can keep," he said. "You will never be alone in this. Neither of you will." Angela's eyes glistened, but she did not look away. For the first time, she let the silence between them feel like safety rather than distance. Later that day, they took Lila to the park again. The snow had almost disappeared, leaving damp patches of grass and the smell of earth. Lila ran ahead, her laughter echoing across the open space. Angela and Michael followed at a slower pace. "She has so much energy," Angela said, watching her daughter twirl in the sunlight. "She reminds me of possibility," Michael said softly. "She moves as if she knows the world is still good." Angela nodded. "She believes that because she has not been proven wrong yet." They sat on a bench overlooking the pond. For a while, neither spoke. The sound of children playing and the flutter of wings filled the air. Then Angela said quietly, "You know, before you came back into our lives, I used to wonder what forgiveness would feel like. I thought it would come like thunder, loud, sudden, undeniable. But it does not. It comes like this." "Like what?" he asked gently. "Like peace you do not expect," she said. "Like being able to breathe again." Michael looked out over the water. "Then maybe forgiveness is not something we earn. Maybe it is something we learn to receive." Angela smiled faintly. "Maybe you are right." When Lila came running back, holding a small stone shaped like a heart, she handed it to her mother. "For you," she said proudly. "It is a lucky rock." Angela smiled and kissed her forehead. "Then we will keep it close." As the afternoon light faded, they walked back to the apartment. The air was colder again, but inside their hearts, something had warmed. That evening, after dinner, Lila insisted that Michael read her favorite story, the one about the fox who wanted to buy a star. She nestled beside him on the couch while Angela watched from her chair. His voice was calm, deep, steady, and full of tenderness. When the story ended, Lila whispered, "Do you think the fox ever found the star?" Michael smiled. "I think he did. Because sometimes, the star finds you first." Lila nodded sleepily. "That is what Mama said." Angela stood and pulled a blanket over her daughter. "It is bedtime, sweetheart." Lila yawned. "Good night, Mama. Good night, Mr. Michael." "Good night, little one," he said softly. After she was asleep, Angela turned to him. "She has grown attached to you," she said quietly. "I do not know how to explain it to her if—" She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Michael shook his head. "Do not think that way. Not tonight. Tonight, she is safe, and you are here. That is enough." "Oh." Angela looked down, the bracelet on her wrist catching the light. "You really believe that, do you?" "Yes," he said, "because I have learned that enough is everything we ever needed." The clock ticked softly. The world outside the window shimmered with faint moonlight. Michael stood to leave, pausing by the door. "Rest," he said. "Tomorrow will take care of itself." Angela nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Michael." "Oh." When he stepped into the hallway, the air felt cool and still. The city stretched around him, vast and glowing, but for the first time in his life, it did not feel lonely. He looked back at the window, where the light still burned, soft and golden. Somewhere inside that small apartment, a mother and daughter were learning to trust life again, and he was learning what it meant to belong. The days that followed moved gently, like pages turning in a book that no one wanted to end. The snow had melted completely now, leaving the city wrapped in a pale gold light of early spring. For the first time in months, Angela's apartment smelled of fresh air and blooming flowers. A small vase of white lilies sat on the windowsill Michael had brought them that morning, saying quietly that they reminded him of resilience. Angela was getting ready for her second hospital visit. Her movements were slower, but she tried to mask her weakness behind small smiles. Lila packed her mother's scarf and gloves into a tote bag, humming a tune she had made up. "Mama, the doctor will say you are all better this time," she said confidently. Angela knelt to brush a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "I hope so, sweetheart," she said softly. "But whatever he says, we will be all right." Michael stood by the door, his coat already on, watching them with quiet affection. "Ready?" he asked. Angela nodded. "As ready as I will ever be." Oh, the hospital waiting room was busier this time, full of muted conversations and the scent of disinfectant. Angela was taken into an examination room while Michael and Lila waited outside. Lila sat swinging her legs from the chair, a small paper flower in her hands. "Mr. Michael," she said, "Mama says doctors are like mechanics for hearts. They fix what is broken." Michael smiled faintly. "Sometimes they can. Sometimes they help hearts remember how to heal themselves." "Well," Lila thought for a moment, then nodded. "You help hearts too," she said matter-of-factly. "You helped ours." He felt a lump rise in his throat. "Maybe your mother helped mine first," he said quietly. When Angela finally returned, her expression was calm but unreadable. Lila ran to her immediately. "Mama, what did he say?" Angela crouched down and smiled, though her eyes shimmered faintly. "He said I have to be very brave for a while," she said, "and that I will need help." Lila wrapped her arms tightly around her mother's waist. "Then we will help you," she said fiercely. Michael placed a gentle hand on Angela's shoulder. "Whatever you need," he said softly, "I am here." She looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know." That evening, back at the apartment, Angela rested on the couch while Michael made soup in the kitchen. Lila sat at the table, drawing again. When he brought 2 bowls over, she proudly held up her paper. "Look, it is a hospital, but it has flowers all around it so it does not feel sad." Michael smiled. "That is beautiful. Maybe you should show that to your mother." Lila grinned and ran over to her. Angela took the paper carefully, her fingers trembling slightly. "It is perfect," she said, her voice soft. "You make everything better, Lila." Lila tilted her head. "I think you and Mr. Michael do that," she said. Angela smiled faintly. "Maybe we all do." Oh. Later that night, when Lila had fallen asleep, Angela sat by the window with a blanket around her shoulders. Michael sat across from her, the lamplight painting warm gold across the small room. "I am scared," she said quietly. "Not of dying, but of leaving her. She is too young to understand." Michael leaned forward. "You are not leaving her," he said firmly. "You are teaching her what love looks like when it refuses to give up. That will stay with her longer than anything else." "Oh." Angela looked at him, her eyes wet but steady. "You talk like someone who has lost before." He nodded slowly. "I have. I lost myself for years. I had everything except meaning. Then one day a little girl asked me if $3 could buy a father, and somehow that question fixed what nothing else could." Angela covered her mouth, a tear escaping down her cheek. "She changed you," she whispered. "She saved me," he said simply. The silence between them stretched softly, full of things neither could say aloud. Then Angela spoke again. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything," he replied. "If things get harder, promise you will not let her go back to the bridge. Promise you will make sure she always has light." Michael's voice was firm but tender. "I promise you she will never be without light again." Angela smiled faintly, the tension in her shoulders easing. "You sound sure." "I am," he said. Because she is my light now, too. They sat there for a long while, listening to the city hum outside. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, then faded into the night. The clock ticked softly, marking the fragile peace between moments. When Angela finally drifted off to sleep, Michael covered her gently with the blanket. He stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street below. The world seemed to move slower here, as if it understood that something sacred was unfolding in this small apartment. He thought of all the boardrooms and hotels he had stood in over the years, surrounded by success yet untouched by meaning. None of them had felt as full as this simple room. As he turned off the lamp and prepared to leave, he looked one last time at Angela and Lila sleeping peacefully. The sight anchored him in a way he could not explain. For the first time in his life, Michael understood what purpose felt like. Not a goal to reach, but a promise to keep. He whispered quietly before closing the door, "You will never be alone again." Outside, the wind carried the faintest scent of lilies, and the city lights flickered like stars, trying to find their way home. The following week came with early spring rain that washed the city clean. The streets shimmered, and the air carried the scent of wet earth and blooming magnolias. Inside the small apartment, the rhythm of life continued quietly. Angela's strength rose and fell like the tide. Some days she could laugh with Lila over pancakes, and other days she barely had the energy to sit up. Through it all, Michael was there, steady and calm, like a pillar holding the room together. That morning, he arrived with a small grocery bag and a handful of daisies wrapped in brown paper. Lila ran to greet him as always, her small feet tapping against the floor. "Mr. Michael, Mama is painting today," she said excitedly. Angela looked up from the corner of the room where she sat near the window, a brush in her trembling hand. "Only a little," she said. "Lila insisted I try." Michael smiled. "I did not know you painted." Angela shrugged lightly. "I used to, a long time ago. It helped me make sense of the noise in my head." He walked closer to look at the canvas. It was simple, 3 figures standing beneath a golden sky. The tallest figure held the hand of a small girl, while the third figure stood beside them, her face turned toward the light. "It is beautiful," he said softly. Angela smiled faintly. "It is just colors, but maybe one day it will tell a story." Lila tugged at his sleeve. "She is painting us," she whispered proudly. He glanced at Angela, who looked slightly embarrassed. "It is not finished," she said quickly. "It does not have to be," he replied. "It already says everything." They spent the afternoon together. Lila did her homework at the table while Michael helped Angela prepare lunch. The kitchen filled with the aroma of soup simmering slowly on the stove. The atmosphere felt warm, like the kind of home that built itself without effort. At one point, Angela leaned against the counter, slightly out of breath. Michael turned immediately. "You should sit," he said gently. "I am fine," she murmured, though her hand trembled slightly. He guided her to the chair and handed her a glass of water. "You do not have to do everything," he said softly. Angela smiled weakly. "I am just not used to letting someone else help." "Well," he said, "you are getting better at it." She chuckled quietly. "Maybe that is the lesson I needed to learn." Later, while Lila napped, Angela and Michael sat by the window. The rain had stopped, and soft sunlight filtered through the clouds. She looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "I have been thinking about what you said about promises," she said. He nodded slowly. "What about them?" "They are strange things," she said. "People make them thinking they are gifts, but really, they are weights. They tie us to the truth of who we want to be." Michael thought for a moment. Maybe that is the point. Maybe promises keep us from walking away when things get hard. Angela looked down at her hands. "Do you ever wish you could go back? Start again before everything fell apart?" He took a deep breath. "I used to. I thought if I could rewrite my past, I could erase the things I regret. But now, I think maybe we are not supposed to go back. Maybe redemption only works in the present tense." Angela nodded slowly. "That sounds like something my grandmother would have said." He smiled faintly. "Then she must have been wise." "She was," Angela said. "She used to tell me, grace is not found in perfection, but in persistence." I never understood it until now. The silence that followed was gentle, full of shared understanding. Then Angela looked at him again, her expression softer than before. "You have become part of our world, Michael. I do not think Lila even remembers what it was like before you. He looked toward the small couch where the little girl slept, her face peaceful. She changed me, he said quietly. And you did too. Oh, Angela smiled. I never thought I would hear that from the man who once signed away my job. Michael lowered his eyes. I deserved that. But you also deserve to forgive yourself, she said. I see how you look at her with love, not guilt. That is what she needs. He nodded slowly. And what about you? Angela looked out the window. I think I am finally learning to let life be kind again. When Lila woke up, the three of them went for a short walk. The sky had cleared, and puddles reflected the sunlight like small mirrors. Lila splashed in them, laughing so hard that a passerby smiled at the sight. Angela held Michael's arm for balance, her steps small but steady. At one point, she stopped and looked up at the sky. Do you hear that? She asked. Michael tilted his head. The birds? She nodded. I used to listen to them when Lila was a baby. I told her they were angels pretending to be small so they could stay close. He smiled. I like that story. Angela looked at him with a quiet seriousness. Promise me you will keep telling her stories, even when I cannot. He met her gaze. You will, he said firmly. You will tell her yourself. But she only smiled, a soft, knowing smile that carried both hope and acceptance. Maybe. But just in case, promise me anyway. He hesitated, then placed his hand gently over hers. I promise, he said. The wind picked up slightly, carrying the faint scent of flowers. Lila ran back to them, holding a small feather she had found on the ground. Look, she said excitedly. An angel dropped this. Angela laughed softly. Maybe she did, she said. As they walked home, the light turned golden, stretching long shadows across the sidewalk. Michael glanced at the two of them beside him, one small hand clutching a feather, the other wrapped gently around his arm, and he realized that for the first time in his life, he was exactly where he was meant to be. Spring settled into the city with a quiet gentleness. The air had softened, and the smell of rain was replaced by blooming jasmine from the balconies above Angela's building. The days had begun to feel almost normal again, at least. That was how Michael hoped Angela and Lila would see them. Every morning, he still arrived with breakfast or flowers, pretending it was just routine, though part of him knew he was trying to hold on to time that was slowly slipping away. Angela's strength had good days and bad ones. On her good days, she moved through the apartment with a kind of grace that made him forget how fragile she really was. On her bad days, the silence of the room said everything she could not. That morning, Lila was sitting cross-legged on the floor, carefully braiding the ribbon from one of the grocery bags. Mr. Michael, she said, her tone serious, I am making a bracelet like Mama's. When it is finished, you have to wear it. Michael smiled. That sounds like an honor. It is not just a bracelet, she explained. It is a promise holder. Mama says when people wear something made with love, promises do not get lost. Angela smiled faintly from the couch. She has been saying that since yesterday, she said softly. Apparently, I have raised a philosopher. Michael laughed gently. I think she takes after you. Angela shook her head. She takes after hope. That is what she was born from. For a few moments, the room filled only with the sound of soft music from the radio and the steady rhythm of Lila's humming. Then Michael turned to Angela. How are you feeling today? She hesitated before answering. I have been more tired lately. The doctor says we will need to start treatment soon. Michael's expression tightened. Then we will do it. Whatever you need, medicine, transport, help at home, I will handle it. Angela looked at him with quiet gratitude. You already do more than I could ever ask. I do not want Lila to see me as weak. He shook his head gently. She does not. She sees you as strong because you keep standing. That is all she remembers. Angela's eyes softened. You always know what to say. I do not, he said quietly. I just say what I wish someone had told me when I needed to hear it. A soft knock interrupted them. It was the building's landlord, a kind woman with a warm smile. She handed Angela a letter and said she would come back later for the rent. Angela looked uneasy but nodded. After the door closed, she opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a notice, an increase in rent beginning next month. Michael noticed her expression. What is it? Rent is going up, she said, folding the paper. Not by much, but more than I can manage right now. Without hesitation, Michael reached for his wallet. "I will take care of it." Angela frowned. "No. You've done enough." "Angela," he said firmly, "let me do this." She sighed, torn between pride and exhaustion. "You make it hard to argue with you," she said finally. "That is because I am not arguing," he replied with a soft smile. "I am helping my family." The word family lingered in the air like something sacred. Angela looked down, blinking back tears. "You really mean that, do you?" He nodded. "I do. You and Lila have become my reason for showing up every day." Angela reached for his hand, her touch light but steady. "Then you have already kept your promise," she said. Later that afternoon, they decided to go for a walk. The weather was warm enough for light jackets. Lila skipped between them, her hand in each of theirs. The city around them buzzed with quiet life street vendors calling out, children playing near fountains, music drifting from a cafe nearby. They stopped at a small park bench where Angela could rest. Lila climbed onto the bench beside her and began tying the ribbon bracelet she had finished. She held it up proudly. "It is done, see? 2 knots for Mama, 1 for you, and 1 for me. That way, if anyone gets lost, we can always find each other." Angela smiled, tears gathering in her eyes. "That is beautiful, baby." Lila slipped the bracelet around Michael's wrist. "Now you have to promise again," she said seriously. Michael looked at her, his voice steady but full of warmth. "I promise to always find my way back to you." Lila nodded in approval. "Good. Then the magic will work." Angela laughed softly, brushing a tear away. "You are going to make him believe in magic again." Michael looked at her with quiet sincerity. "Maybe I already do." As the sun began to dip, they walked back home slowly. Angela leaned on his arm, her steps small but sure. The golden light wrapped around them, and the city seemed to slow down, as if watching them pass. When they reached the apartment, Lila ran ahead to feed the small bird that always perched near their window. Angela stood by the doorway, watching her daughter with a faint smile. "She is happy," she whispered. "She is loved," Michael said. Angela turned to him. "So are you," she said softly. He looked at her, the words sinking deep. "That means more than you know," she smiled faintly. "Maybe one day, you will stop doubting that." Oh, that night, after Lila had gone to bed, Angela sat quietly painting again. The picture was different this time. The figures still stood under the golden sky, but now the light stretched farther, reaching into the edges of the canvas. She did not notice that Michael was watching from the doorway. When she finally looked up, he said softly, "It is brighter now." She nodded. "Because this time, I remembered to paint hope." He stepped closer. "Then maybe hope has been the real story all along." Angela smiled, setting her brush down. "Yes," she said quietly, "and maybe we are finally learning how to live inside it." Outside, the wind brushed against the window, carrying the faint scent of spring rain again. In that small apartment, 3 lives once broken by loss had found their way back to light. And for the first time in years, all 3 slept beneath the same quiet peace. The morning sun filtered through thin curtains, bathing the small apartment in soft gold. Angela woke slowly, her body aching but her mind clear. Lila was already awake, humming quietly to herself as she arranged her crayons in a neat line across the table. Michael had stopped by early, as he always did. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the room, mixing with the faint scent of lilies from the vase on the windowsill. "Good morning," Angela said, her voice gentle but tired. Michael turned from the kitchen counter and smiled. "Good morning. I brought breakfast." Lila looked up eagerly. "Did you bring the muffins again?" He laughed. "Of course. You made me promise, remember?" Angela smiled faintly. "You spoil her. She deserves it," he said, glancing at the little girl. "Both of you do." They ate together quietly. The morning felt peaceful, almost fragile, as if everyone in the room knew that time was becoming something to protect. After breakfast, Lila ran off to pack her small backpack for school. Michael helped Angela clear the table, but she moved slower than usual, her hands trembling slightly. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice full of concern. She nodded. "Just tired. It is one of those mornings." He watched her carefully. "You should rest. I can take Lila to school today." Angela hesitated. "You really do not have to." "I want to," he said, gently but firmly. Lila returned, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. "Ready," she said proudly. Angela kissed her forehead. "Be good today." "I always am," Lila replied with a grin. Michael smiled and held out his hand. "Come on, kiddo. Let us go make the world a little brighter." As they left, Angela stood by the window, watching them walk down the street. Michael slowed his stride to match Lila's small steps. They looked, for a moment, like something complete, a man and a child moving through morning light, as if life itself had decided to give them a second chance. At school, Lila squeezed his hand before running toward her classroom. "See you later, Mr. Michael," she called out. He waved back. "Always," he said. On the way back to the apartment, Michael stopped at a florist. He picked up a small arrangement of white roses and lavender. The florist, a kind older woman, smiled knowingly. "For someone special?" He nodded softly. "For someone brave." When he returned, Angela was sitting on the couch, a blanket around her shoulders. Her eyes lit up when she saw the flowers. "They are beautiful," she said. "They reminded me of you," he said simply. She touched one of the petals, her smile soft but distant. "I have not been called beautiful in a long time." "You should have been," he replied. The silence that followed was warm, filled with words they both understood, but did not need to say. Angela looked toward the window. "Do you ever wonder why things happen the way they do?" He thought for a moment. I used to. I used to think everything was random, just luck or loss. But now I think maybe it all happens to lead us somewhere to someone." Angela nodded slowly. "I think that too." The afternoon passed quietly. Michael stayed to help with chores and to keep her company. They talked about small things, favorite songs, childhood memories, the way the air smelled after rain. For a while, it felt like the world outside had stopped spinning. Later, when Lila returned from school, she found them sitting together, laughing softly at an old story Angela was telling. She ran to them, dropping her backpack with a thud. "Guess what, Mama? My teacher said my picture was the best in class." Angela's face brightened. "Of course it was. What did you draw?" Lila pulled a folded paper from her bag and opened it proudly. "It is us," she said. "You, me, and Mr. Michael. We are standing under the big tree from the park. See? I even drew the ducks." Angela smiled through tears. "It is beautiful, sweetheart." Michael knelt beside her. "You made me taller," he said, pretending to frown. Lila giggled. "That is because you are like a superhero now. Super tall, super kind, super everything." Angela laughed softly. "That sounds about right." As the evening light faded, Lila fell asleep on the couch with her head resting on Michael's leg. Angela watched quietly, her eyes full of something between gratitude and sorrow. "She adores you," she said softly. Michael looked down at the sleeping child. "I adore her too," he said. "She reminds me what love looks like before it gets complicated." Angela nodded slowly. "She has always been my reason for staying." "And you have been hers," he said. Angela's voice trembled slightly. "Michael, if anything happens to me..." He stopped her gently. "Do not," he said. "You are going to be here." "But if I am not," she continued, her tone steady but filled with quiet truth, "I need you to promise me you will not let her lose that light. Promise me you will make sure she keeps believing in good things." He swallowed hard. "You have my word." Angela's eyes softened. "You already kept your first promise. I believe you will keep this one too." They sat together in silence as the night deepened. The streetlights outside cast long shadows across the room. Michael brushed a strand of hair from Lila's face and whispered, "You are safe, little one." Angela closed her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. "For the first time, I believe that." When Michael finally stood to leave, the apartment was still and full of peace. He looked back one last time at Angela, resting on the couch, and Lila sleeping beside her. The air felt sacred, as if time itself had slowed to honor the fragile beauty of that moment. Outside, the moon hung low over the city. Michael walked slowly, his heart heavy but full, knowing that love, real love, was not measured by how long it lasted, but by how deeply it changed the people who shared it. The morning after was calm, the sky washed in pale gold. The city moved slowly beneath soft clouds, and in the little apartment, everything was quiet except for the sound of birds at the window. Michael arrived early as usual, but the moment he stepped inside, He sensed something had changed. Angela was sitting by the window, wrapped in her blanket, her face calm and thoughtful. Lila was beside her, still in her pajamas, resting her head on her mother's arm. They looked peaceful together, like a painting come to life. "Good morning," Michael said softly. Angela smiled faintly. "You are early." "I could not sleep," he said. Lila looked up, her eyes still heavy with dreams. "Mr. Michael, Mama said the sky looks like it is full of angel feathers today." He glanced out the window. The clouds were soft and white, glowing like light itself. "She might be right," he said. "It looks like heaven sent the sky to visit us." Lila giggled. "Maybe the angels are having breakfast up there." Angela brushed a hand over her daughter's hair. "Maybe they are," she said gently. They shared breakfast quietly. Angela ate only a little, her hands delicate and slow. When she put her spoon down, she looked at Michael for a long moment. "Do you remember the first day you met her?" she asked. "I do," he said, his voice low. "She asked me if $3 could buy a father." Angela smiled softly. "She believed you would say yes." Michael swallowed hard. "I think I did, just not in the way she meant." Angela nodded. "You became more than that. You became home." The words hung in the air, simple but heavy. Michael reached across the table, resting his hand over hers. "And you both became the reason I wake up." "Oh." Angela looked down, her voice trembling slightly. "If tomorrow comes and I cannot," he stopped her gently. "You will be here, in her laughter, in her kindness, in every good thing she becomes." Angela's eyes filled with tears, but her smile stayed. "Then I can rest easy." Lila interrupted softly, her small voice filled with certainty. "Mama, you are not going anywhere. The angels already have enough feathers." Angela laughed through her tears and pulled her daughter close. "You might be right," she whispered. They sat like that for a while, three souls wrapped in the quiet rhythm of love and forgiveness. Outside, the sunlight grew brighter, spilling across the floor like a blessing. Later, when Lila went to her room to draw, Angela turned to Michael. "Promise me one more thing," she said. "Anything. Do not forget to live, Michael, even when it hurts." He nodded, unable to speak. Angela smiled faintly. "That is what love asks of us, to keep living." "Oh," he understood. And as he sat there beside her, listening to the sound of pencils scratching in the next room, Michael realized that some promises were not meant to be spoken again. They were meant to be lived. That morning, as light filled the small apartment, everything felt still and sacred and whole just for a moment, long enough to remember that love, when real, never leaves. It simply changes shape and keeps shining. Spring turned into summer quietly. The city grew brighter, the days longer, and the air filled with the scent of jasmine and rain. The little apartment still held its warmth, but it was different now, softer, quieter, like a song that knew it had reached its final verse. Angela's health had weakened, but her spirit remained strong. She spent her mornings near the window, painting small canvases that Lila helped her decorate with pressed flowers. Each one was full of light gold skies, bright trees, and three small figures standing together. One late afternoon, the sunlight spilled across the room, and Angela looked at Michael with a smile that carried both peace and goodbye. "You kept your promise," she said softly. He shook his head gently. "We kept it together." Lila was sitting on the floor nearby, drawing as always. She looked up and said, "Mama, I am making another promise bracelet. One for you, one for me, and one for Mr. Michael. That way, even if you go somewhere far, you can still find us." Angela smiled, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then I will never be lost." That evening, as the sun set, Angela rested while Lila fell asleep beside her. Michael sat quietly across the room, listening to the steady rhythm of the city outside. The air felt sacred, heavy with stillness and love. When morning came, the light broke through the curtains just the way Angela loved, soft and golden. Michael woke to silence, and in that silence, he understood. Angela was gone, her face calm, her hand still holding Lila's. He did not cry at first. He only sat beside them, the morning light wrapping the room in gold. Lila stirred, opened her eyes, and whispered, "Mama?" Michael took her small hand. She is with the angels now, he said softly. But she is still here, in us. Alder, Lila looked at him for a long moment, then placed her bracelet on her mother's wrist. Then she can find us whenever she wants, she said. He nodded, his voice breaking. Yes, she can. Years passed, and the little girl grew into a young woman. The apartment changed hands, but the painting on the wall never moved. It showed 3 figures under a golden sky, the same one Angela had finished on her last good day. Michael visited often. Sometimes they sat together in silence. Sometimes they laughed, remembering small moments. And sometimes they simply watched the sun rise the way Angela once did. One day, Lila looked at him and said, "You kept your promise." He smiled faintly. We both did. Outside, the world went on, children laughing, birds singing, people rushing by. But in that small corner of the city, love had not faded. It had only changed shape, finding new ways to stay. And when the evening light touched the window just right, it still looked like 3 figures standing together. One man, one woman, and one little girl beneath a sky that would never stop shining.